So I want to start by showing you a picture, which won't come as any surprise to you. Mm-hmm. And it's 20 of the top nominees for the Oscars this year. And when I look at that, these are all people who are well respected in their business, no question about that. But it doesn't say 2016, to a lot of people who look at it.
Yeah.
What does it say to you when you look at that?
It says we have some work to do. There is a problem. There's absolutely a problem. All of these performances, I think, deserve their nomination, but they don't reflect what's going on in movies right now. And they certainly don't reflect the movie audience. There were great films last year. Films like Creed, which I think could have had actors nominated. Films like Straight Outta Compton.
It had an actor nominated.
That's right.
But not an actor of color.
That's right, Sylvester Stallone. Which to me is interesting. I mean, look, these are qualitative judgments. You can't say that there is anything kind of statistical or quantitative there, but what you can say is that this is reflective of general trends in the movie-going world. And that trend is that the inclusiveness that I think the audience wants, and that we actually see on television, for instance, is not being reflected in the movie theater.
Is this a movie production problem or is it a movie nomination problem? Because it's not like there weren't a lot of good roles taken by non-whites in movies in this past year. Mm-hmm. They just weren't nominated in those roles.
I think it's a problem at every step of the process. Every link in the chain has issues that I think need to be looked at. So when it comes to actually, what movies get greenlit, written, developed by the major studios and the major film companies, there's an issue there. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences is an old institution that is not going to move quickly on a dime. So, changing its awareness of these issues, changing its membership maybe to better reflect the current film production world, all of those things are going to take time. But the good news, I guess, is that we're having this debate. And look, if someone is able to say out loud, I wasn't that interested in Straight Outta Compton because I just didn't relate to it, that's fine. I'd rather have that as the starting point for a conversation than have people pretend that that film had an equal shot at an Oscar nomination.
Is there any evidence that things are going to change or that things have even started to change?
There is. Cheryl Boone-Isaacs, who's the head of the Academy, and Don Hudson, who's the CEO, they're both looking to make changes in Academy membership and in how members vote. So they put forward a set of proposals in terms of how that could change.
Tell me about that. Like, what would be different about membership? What would be different about how they vote?
I think the key things are they want to make sure that you are consistently working in the film industry to make sure that the people who are voting are actually still engaged with what's going on right now. So if you haven't been active for, say, the last 30 years and you've never been nominated for an Academy Award, then you get a different...
There are actually people like that who are making the decisions today?
Absolutely, yeah. There are people in the Academy who were very active, 40, 50 years ago. They went on to do something else. Maybe they're selling real estate now or something else. They haven't been active. They never got nominated, but they still have voting rights.
But it just sounds like it makes no sense.
But I'm sure it's not the only institution where that's the case. A lot of institutions, they end up, developing a membership that had their glory days many, many years ago. And I think that's the case with the Academy. I've seen a study that said they would have to make essentially all of the incoming members over the next several years people of color to actually get close to what, the current Hollywood demographics are. So that's a problem too.
So tell me about Canada. Do we have a problem, a similar problem within the industry here?
I think if you look at the Canadian Academy, the Oscars equivalent, and the nominations that we've had this year, it looks a lot better. I still think, though, that the stories that Canadian filmmakers are telling to us as audience members doesn't fully reflect what this country is. For instance, the Indigenous culture and population of this country is essential to who we are as Canadians. We see so few feature films that are based on Indigenous stories. Why is that? The stories are certainly as dramatic as any other stories. The talent is there, the writers are there. So why aren't we seeing those stories, for instance?
So why aren't we?
I think it comes down to who gets in the room when it comes to the funders. Movies cost a lot of money. Who decides what stories are going to be of mass appeal? And I think anytime you sit down to propose a story for a movie, you're going to have to convince whoever's got the money that your movie is relatable. And often stories about Indigenous people, about Black people, about Asians, about Latin Americans are not seen as relatable. That's got to change. I mean, I grew up, as many people did, going to movies, loving movies, almost never seeing anything like my life or my family's life on screen. And then at a certain point, you get tired of that, you know, and you feel just exhausted. You don't want to see that anymore. You want to see yourself. And more and more Canadians will be asking for that, and I think it's incumbent on the people who have the money to make movies to give it to us.
You know Stephen James, very promising young Canadian actor. Well, more than promise, he's delivered. And he's currently in Race, the Jesse Owens film, and he's been, as we know, in others. We were talking to him the other day, and let me read you what he said, because I think it's somewhat the same as what you're saying. I feel like we have to foster more diverse creation.
You know, we have to give people of color more opportunities to create, to have a space where they're able to write stories about people who look like them, you know, from their walks of life that they can relate to. And the same thing goes for women and old people and young people alike. I feel like we gotta, it comes from the storytelling process, that stage. We have to foster that from the earlier stages, and that way, we'll be able to see ourselves on the screen if we're behind it. You know what I mean? I think that's important, that we're doing the behind the scenes work.
Same thing?
Absolutely. I think what's important to note is that this idea of seeing yourself on screen is only a big deal if you're not used to it. If you go to the movies and you watch TV and you see yourself on screen all the time, you don't even notice that it's a problem. But if you grow up, not seeing yourself on screen, if you go to a movie and then you go out with your friends and your friends are all also people of color, are also not reflected on the big screen, and your conversation afterwards is about, where were we, then that becomes tiresome after a while.
What about pushing it beyond telling the stories of, who we are and the kind of lives we're living and growing up, but simply to say that a person of color versus a person not of color.
You can say a white person.
Funny, yeah, as odd as that sounds, right? Are treated equally when they come in on the, on the audition. That it doesn't matter. It simply doesn't matter. I mean, you see it to some degree in theater, in a Shakespearean play, where they'll say, okay, this role was not created for a Black person, but a Black person is going to play this role.
Right. Yeah. Should there be a Black James Bond? Why not? James Bond is a fictional character, as are Shakespeare's characters, right? They don't have to be any given ethnicity. But we've seen such pushback when the idea of Idris Elba playing James Bond came up, when the idea of a Black stormtrooper came up in Star Wars. And then also we have to look at fantasy characters, superheroes, the kind of the creatures that exist in fantasy in the movies. Why do they have to be white? They can be whatever the people who imagine the movie want it to be. And I think the kind of non-traditional casting we've seen in the theater, I'd love to see more of that in the movies as well.
Now, there's a lot more to our conversation with Cameron Bailey. You can watch the rest this weekend on One at its usual times.